let's get right into it because I think today's little video is going to be a long one. What I am going to show you today is 4 different techniques in Illustrator for creating layered designs. Now you can see in my little Google Images search right here on the right that this is kind of what I'm talking about. This idea of creating multiple layers that you could then cut out of paper on a like a cry cut or something like that. Or is it Cricut? I always say cry cut. Or anything like that, as well as the Glowforge laser or some other kind of laser cutting device. So there's tons of different ways to make these, and I'm sure there's infinite techniques beyond this, but I'm going to show you 4 ways that I might do this. So let's get into Adobe Illustrator and we'll get started. So I have 4 different basic techniques for creating the layered designs, and we're going to kind of go through them one by one. This one is hand inked, where you're essentially drawing each layer beneath the top layer. The offset path is probably the fastest way, but it gives you the least amount of variation. As you can see, it's very uniform in how it works. So every layer has a slightly fatter layer beneath it. With the nice sliced method, I think this is actually the easiest way to do it. It's relatively quick, and it's kind of, it has I would say it's a little less complex than doing it hand inked, but it has a similar really nice effect. And then the stained glass method, and this is a really, really simple way to, I wouldn't necessarily call this layer design method, this is kind of the outlier here, but a lot of people would like the idea of kind of maybe infilling with colors and then creating the little pieces that go inside the line art. So that's the stained glass technique. So let's go back to the very beginning and let's talk about actually creating the illustration. So I typically start this in a separate file, and you can see here's some kind of sketches that I haven't really completed. And what I'm going to do is be using a tablet. So I have like a Wacom Intuos Pro from like 6 years ago. You don't need the fanciest one. They all work great. Don't think you need the $600 Cintiq, or I think it's way more than that. But you get the idea. You don't need it. You just need some kind of pen, tablet, something like that if you want to have line art with sort of like variations in pressure. Now you could do this with the pen tool and a mouse, but I prefer to use a tablet. It's much faster. So basically this is so simple. All I'm going to do is go over here to where my paintbrush tool is, click and hold, select paintbrush, and then I'm going to make a new paintbrush. So I already have them here, but I'm just going to find my paintbrush panel. I'm going to click plus. I'm going to create a new calligraphic brush, and then I'm going to set this to size 3. I'm going to change the variation to pressure, and I'm going to set it to 3. That's it. It's pretty much the only brush I use for what I'm doing. Now there's so many different ways to vary this brush and do lots of different things. That's all you need, that brush. And then what I'm going to do is when I'm doing my sketches, I'm going to tell you, a lot of artists cheat, and I cheat. And one of the ways I cheat is that I will go find reference images and I will put them on a layer, and then I'll double click that layer and I will dim the images and then usually lock the layer. And that just sort of gives me an idea of like body positioning. And now you can see here that my actual drawings, I'm not tracing this exactly. I'm just using it as a way to sort of compare proportions as I draw my own designs. So you can see here, I have a barn owl, but my drawing does not really look like that barn owl. And I think that's a great way to use reference. It just helps me kind of get a sense of like length, distance, without having to do a ton of sketching beforehand. You can see same with my hummingbird. It's a completely different head position. I'm exaggerating things, adjusting things. Maybe somebody thinks that's cheating. I don't. So that's my technique for kind of getting the drawings going. So what I would do then is after I have my reference is create a new layer, lock that reference layer so that I'm not accidentally moving it, come back to my calligraphic brush, and then select a color that's going to be really obvious to see. So I'm going to select red for this example. And then I'm just going to begin drawing and just kind of deciding what elements I want to pull out, what elements I want to kind of focus on. I'm not going to overthink it right now, but just imagine this is essentially how I would do it. So you can sit there and you can lay out a sketch like this and kind of be really loose and sort of like build up your reference for what you're going to be doing. It's whatever you want to do. And then if you want to adjust size, I don't really create a new calligraphic brush. I just increase my stroke weight, and that will increase my base size without eliminating my pressure sensitivity. So that's the essentials. I'm not going to take you through the whole process of me drawing it. I'm just going to kind of skip that, and we're going to go here to my drawing. So I was trying to create something really simple, but I have like a problem and I'm just not capable of creating anything simple. So I made this with a ton of sections, and it's got a lot of little places. So this type of drawing would not be ideal necessarily for the stained glass technique. And that's if you're doing laser cutting. So I want you to imagine that you had to cut out every single one of these little feathers and stick them in and not lose them in your crumb tray. It's not gonna happen. But it would work really well for like maybe resin filling, and this would kind of be maybe your color guide. So we're actually going to start with this technique because it's actually the basis of the other techniques. So once you have all of your beautiful line art finished, and you can see it is indeed still line art, it's not shapes. I can actually adjust the stroke weights of items and change them if I want to. I'm going to get this set into one flat layer. And I'm sorry, you can probably hear my cat screaming in the background. That is my perpetual background music. So I'm actually going to highlight everything that I've drawn. I'm going to go to Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. And then once I've done that, oh my God, these cats, they're the bane of my existence sometimes. All right, so once I've done that, I'm going to have everything together. I'm going to come to my Pathfinder panel, which looks like this. And then I'm going to unite everything. And that's because I don't want all these little overlapping areas that are just individual little shapes getting broken apart or scooting around. If you do not see this panel, go to Window and Pathfinder, and it's going to pop it up for you. So I'm going to unite everything, and now you can see if we zoom in, it's all one solid shape. But there's typically a little bit of cleanup that needs to happen. So I will then take my direct selection tool, and I'm going to go find like little stray nodes or areas, and I'm going to like delete those or clean those up, because especially with laser cutting, if that node is there, your laser's going to cut it. And if you've ever had something cut where like a weird random line goes across it, it's typically from stuff like these little loose nodes. Now I know this seems really tedious, but if you take your time and find any of these, it's going to make your outcome a lot better. So I just typically will click the little voids inside and then just hit the delete key. Usually you have to hit it a couple times because you're deleting each node. So 1, 2, and you'll kind of see that. So I will just select everything and then look for any weird spots and kind of go through the line art and delete it. And when you're drawing in that first stage, you kind of want to try to not make these. And I know that's really hard to do, but just be mindful when you're actually using your brush tool. So for example, and you're drawing something and you're kind of making some feathers and you're coming back in, you're filling it and sort of adding shading. Just try and keep an eye on what you're doing and try to avoid creating like little gaps of space that you're then going to have to delete later. So the more carefully you draw, the less cleanup you'll have to do, but guaranteed you're going to have 1 or 2 little pixels like this that you're just going to have to delete from the design. So you can also come back through and clean up any areas of overlap that don't look nice to you. So I can come in here, my little mouse is getting away from me, and I can hit my eraser tool and I can just kind of erase and clean up any areas that overlap in a way I don't like. And I'm using my brackets to increase the size or decrease the size. So your left bracket will decrease, your right bracket will increase. So you can clean up anything you don't like the look of. And actually another way to clear these in other than deleting them is to go to your Blob Brush tool, make sure you have the whole object selected, and then you should be able to just color over top, and you see that that just fused it in. So that might be a little bit faster. Some people prefer the Blob Brush tool, but it can be a little finicky. So if it's acting up, double click it and make sure that you have your settings correct. So if you can see here, keep selected and merge only with selection, those will sort of affect how it works. So if you don't have keep selected or don't have merge, you may end up using the blob brush, and it creates like extra shapes on top, and you have to come back to Pathfinder to refuse those. So we don't want to have to do that. So let's just scroll on through real quick. I'm not going to take too much longer on this. I think I got a lot of them. I'm sure there's a few small ones around here that I'm going to have to clean up. Oh my God, these cats. Lord help me. Hold on here. So once you have that complete, you have your beautiful line art. I'm going to just hit merge one more time to make sure if there was any little blob brush pieces that were lost or missed. And then I'm going to come to my shape tool, and that's right now it's under my line tool. Grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to pick a new color. So let's pick something that really contrasts here. We'll do the orange so it's not burning your eyeballs. And I'm going to move that to the right, make a square. And then I'm just going to move this shape over top, and I'm actually going to shrink it just so it'll fit. Now it's behind it. I can hit Command Shift and right bracket to bring it into the front. I can also right mouse click on an object and tell it where to go. So I can right mouse click on this, and I can go to, see, it looks like my mouse is acting up. And I should be able to go to Arrange and Send to Back or Bring to Front. So you can also do it that way. Now what I'm going to do is make sure all of my line art is within the shape, highlight both items, coming back to my Pathfinder, and I'm going to hit Divide. And now it doesn't look like anything happened, but it did. So I'm going to come to my white selection arrow, and I'm going to show you. Now everything is grouped right now, but if I take my white selection arrow, I can select objects within a group, and now you can see that it cut everything apart. So all of the overlapping areas have now created closed shapes, which is really, really nice. It makes everything really easy to work with moving forward. So that's essentially the basics of how you would do stained glass. Now all you need to do from here is you can individually click the objects. You can see they're grouped, so I can right mouse click and ungroup them, and just individually select the different shapes and change their colors. And you can just come through and do anything with the design from there. So really, really easy way to do it. Now, something I would recommend when you do this is to take your purple line art or your line art, whatever it is, move it to a new layer and lock it so you don't accidentally select it every 2 seconds, because it's really annoying when it does that. So I'm going to make it black now that we have the basic design in. I'm going to lock that layer, and now I can easily just select the individual shapes, be careful not to move them, and change their color. So I can go through and do whatever I want to do. An alternate thing you can do here, and let me see if I can remember what tool it's under because I don't use it very much, is there should be somewhere here, if I can find it, the Live Paint tool. And let me see if I can now remember exactly where it is, because I think it's moved, or I may not even have it on here right now. So let's go to Tools, Advanced, there we go, and I'm sure there's a Live Paint bucket somewhere in here if I can find it. There we go. So it's under the Shape Builder tool. There's something called the Live Paint bucket, and now this will allow you to hover over an area with a color and just apply it. And this actually will work if you select an object and turn it into a live paint. So I showed you the shape divider way to make a stained glass design. Let me show you another way you can do it. Now I prefer this first way, and you'll see why in a moment, but I do want to show you the alternate way. So I'm going to unlock that layer real quick, and I'm going to try and grab my black line art, copy and paste it, and I'm going to move it over. And now I'm going to select this, and I'm going to go to Object, Live Paint, Make. I'm going to go back to my Live Paint tool, and I'm going to select whatever color I want to select. So let's take this pink. And now you can just paint in all the shapes, however you want to do it. And you can actually see you can arrow key through. This is the best part of the Live Paint tool. And it will arrow through your swatches. So if you set up your swatches with the colors you want, you can just arrow tool your way through life till you get the colors you want within your swatch windows and just paint them in. Now that is a lot easier for some people, but the reason I don't typically do that, I do it this way, is it makes sure you don't miss any areas, because if you miss a spot and just leave it white, you actually don't have a shape there. So I prefer to do this and then just hand color. So I pick my main base color, in this case it's orange, and then I just do the colors on top. But you can do the live paint method. When you're done with your live paint, Object, Live Paint, expand, and you're gonna end up with the exact same thing you have over here. If you ungroup it, you have individual shapes, done. So that is the basics of technique 1, which is stained glass. I find that really easy to do. If you have a much simpler drawing than this, it's really fast, works great. So let's move on to knife slice, because this one is sort of the next step up from stained glass. You can see I definitely didn't do these in order. So we'll come back to this one here. We're going to just move you off the side. Oops, see, that's why you gotta be careful with groups. You wanna make sure you don't lose all your stuff. So I'm gonna regroup it by hitting Command G. I'm gonna come back to this one, and I'm gonna show you what to do here. So I'm going to once again lock my line art. This is really important. It needs to be on its own layer. And when I turn it off, you can see what we actually have here is a bunch of individual shapes beneath our line art. So now from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go find my knife tool. And my knife tool, I believe, is under my eraser right here. This works really, really well with, once again, a tablet. You can do it with a mouse. It's not super comfortable. And what you do with the knife is I'm gonna just hold my option to get my arrow back, and I'm gonna click shapes, and then I'm gonna use my knife tool to cut through the shapes. Now, I have to go black to black. What I'm essentially saying is you have to make sure you cut all the way from an edge of a shape through to the other edge, otherwise it won't work. Now, once you've done that, you can actually use your white arrow or ungroup to select that shape and then change the color. So this is essentially what's happening behind the scenes. I always leave my line art up, and I just remember you have to go from line art to line art. Now, you can select the shapes individually, and that's what I typically do, and then cut through them. And then you can easily, I'm just holding option here to get my arrow, you can easily grab that piece you just cut and change its color. Or you can go across a much wider set of shapes. So do I want to individually select every one of these feathers? Heck no. So instead of selecting anything, I'm just going to draw my knife across all the way, and you can see it cut all of these shapes here. So now I can grab 1, 2, 3, 4. I can individually select them. I can also like drag and select them, but because of the angle these are at, it's a little annoying. So if you want to select these, I don't know why it took me like 15 years of using Illustrator to learn this, but you can take the lasso tool and you can sort of draw your selection. So kind of like in Photoshop, it works a little differently. And you can see it's going to grab everything it touched. Now it looks like I undid my knife tool. Let's redo that. So we'll cut like that. Use my lasso tool, and then I'm just going to draw over the shapes that I want to select. And it will grab all of them, thank goodness. Saves me so much time. And then I just got to go find this one that kind of snuck off to the side. So you can cut across multiple shapes. You can select and individually slice a single shape. So even because I only have this shape selected, even if I draw my line all the way across, it's only going to cut that shape, which is really helpful because it allows you to have a lot of control over how you divide up this drawing. And so that's where I get kind of this design. So you can see I was able to sort of cut across all of these shapes at once. I individually selected some of them. I could go even further from here and kind of cut through maybe there, just some other ones. Looks like I accidentally selected my line art there, so we don't want to do that. So I think I might have that layer locked, but you get kind of the idea. So this, I think, is a really, really easy technique. You don't have to be the best drawer to do this. As long as you have your line art done, you can go from this step to this step. So let's take a look at our next two techniques, and then I'm going to show you the final part of how to actually set this up for the laser. So I know I'm going a little bit quick, but if you play around with these, it's really easy. So we're just using the divide in our Pathfinder. We're using our knife tool to break apart our shapes to add shading. And now this one is really easy, but I think it's beautiful, but it's not as sort of nuanced as the other one. So this one's very simple. So let's go back to here where we have all of our fun stuff. And actually we'll come down here and select one of these. That's why I set these artboards up and I'm not even using them. And I'm gonna select one of these line arts. They're all fused, ready to go. And I'm gonna go to Object, path, offset path. And now this is the bomb. This is so easy. So all you do is choose your joins and how far you want to offset. So I typically prefer round because it will eliminate some of those little sharp pieces. You see how we had some like odd shapes there? Depends on what your design is to what you need to do. And then I will adjust this, and you can actually use your arrow keys to go up and down. Because I'm set to inches, it's making really big leaps. But let's say we want to set this to 0.08 inches. And that looks pretty good. I'm okay with that. I'm gonna hit OK. Now, you can see based on these weird little circles that I probably have some stray points in this liner, and that's because I haven't cleaned this liner yet. While it's still selected, before I do anything else right now, I'm going to go back to my Pathfinder and I'm going to fuse that together. So let's go find our Pathfinder, hit Unite, bam, it's all one shape now. Now I'm going to change its color so we can actually see what we got here. And you might be going, huh, what happened? It's because it's on top. All you have to do is go to Arrange, Send to Back, and now we have a really cool offset shape here. Now, when you use this technique, you may find you have to do more cleanup because you can see that this created a whole bunch of little tiny pockets, and we do not want our Silhouette Cameo or our Cricut or our Glowforge or our Aeon Laser or whatever name drop to have to try to cut these tiny little shapes because they're useless. So you will have to go back with this technique and check for all of these and delete them. That's my least favorite part of dealing with this technique. But it is really easy because you can just offset and create a bunch of really, really cool designs. And now something worth noting is you can also do a negative offset. So with a negative offset, you can actually have it cut in instead of go outside the shape. So let's actually use our pink layer. You can see I have it selected because my pink popped up, and go the opposite way and try that. So we're gonna go to Object, Path, Offset Path, and now I'm gonna hit -0.0, oh, that's not a point, 0.02, and let's see what happens there. So you can see it now cut in, and I wanna do it a little bit more, so let's say 2.8. I just guess here, I always guess. And then I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna select a new color. Let's try yellow. Okay, so kind of crazy. It's way too close. You can see this would not be good for laser cutting because you're having such tiny peekaboo areas. You have to play with your settings on your sizing, but it's so easy. You can do this in 2 seconds. And you can just kind of keep going from there until you have a design you like. So that's what I did with this one. And you might be wondering, okay, so you did that, you've got 1 color, your line art, 2, your green, 3, your orange. How did you get your base layer? And that's important because I always create a base layer for everything. So to create the base layer, the backer, so to speak, if you're doing a laser cut, that would be the solid shape. All I do is I take my line art and I did what I did with the first technique and then just fuse everything. So let me show you how I would make that. So yellow, Command Shift left bracket to send it behind. Make sure it's lined up. Same thing I did in the very beginning. So here's our refresher, Pathfinder, divide. And then all I have to delete is this way outside shape here. And now this will not work very well if your shape is not closed all the way. And that is probably the #1 thing that will happen to people. They'll leave like a gap and then the outside will be fused into the inside and they'll delete stuff and it won't work. So just make sure when you're doing your drawing for these kinds of projects that you are closing all of your shapes. So from here, I would then take both of these, fuse them, and I now have a solid backer piece. And then I can just slide this behind everybody. So let me grab my arrow tool. Let's give it a color where we'll actually be able to see it. I know my color harmonies are not happening here. And then I would just kind of put that behind everything. Now, in this case, it didn't quite line up, and the reason is because if you remember, with my offset, I basically created something larger than the original line art. So to fix that, all you would do is just take everything again, scoot it over, and refuse it. Solid shape. And now you have a shape that's the correct size. So essentially, just make a copy of your finished work and just fuse it all together, and you should be good. Shh. Oh my gosh, these cats. I cannot ever do tutorial without them screaming in the background. So, okay, so there we go. Where was I? All right, so that's the offset path technique. So stained glass, nice sliced, offset path. And then the truth is, this is what I usually do. I hand ink all of the lower layers. So this is, in some ways, the most straightforward way to do it. I also think it's the way that will take the most time, but it does create some subtleties that you don't get with the others. Ultimately, and the truth is, I will use a combination of all of these techniques in order to get my final design. So I may start with stained glass, dividing everything up, selecting some of the basic colors, breaking them up, slicing in there. I may offset path for one of the layers, and then I'll come back in and do a lot of detailing by hand. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So you can see there is just more naturalistic looking shapes. I think it looks a little more organic. I do like to use a lot of hand inking. Very, very easy. Again, all I'm going to do is take my line art, make sure it's on a locked layer so I don't accidentally mess with it. So unlock. And then when you have an object selected, just so you know, in your layers panel, you can grab it. It'll show that you have selected art. Drag it to a new layer and then hit the lock button. So nice and locked. I'm going to go to an unlocked layer to start doing the inking. Looks like I have a secret piece there. And I'm going to go back to my brush tool, and I'm just going to brush tool away. So where is my brush? You're somewhere. There you are. Okay. And then I would just adjust my size. I'm going to use my brackets here. I still have the same calligraphic brush I used before. And I would literally just go by hand and draw the next layer. So that, it's incredibly tedious to do it this way. But I like the look. I'm just used to drawing like this, so I don't mind taking the time to go through and sort of hand draw everything. You do have to kind of pay attention, because as you can see those gaps? We don't want those. We need to make sure that that stuff is cleaned up, that you have clean edges from each shape to each shape, or you're gonna have weird places that your laser's trying to cut that you don't want to mess with. It's just not, this probably is the most finicky way to do it. And so I would really only do this in combination with one of the other methods. So you can see I can hand draw my layers. I can color them back in. And these are all still lines, by the way. So if you select them, you can use the blob brush instead. These are still like stroked lines that are just laid on top of each other. You could choose to use the blob brush. For some reason, I tend to have trouble with the blob brush, sometimes not wanting to like follow the pressure sensitivity. I think that's just something wrong with my machine. But the blob brush is probably a better way than what I just did, because at least when you create your shapes, they will fuse together. So you can see, instead of making a bunch of lines, it creates a solid shape. And what else is nice is as you're drawing, you can have it fuse together. So if you remember our settings from earlier, let's uncheck merged only with selection. And now, even without that selected, if I paint through here, it's gonna merge automatically with the other shapes. So blob brush or pen tool or whatever, you can kind of, you can see I'm not really working very hard to color this nicely, but that's essentially the technique. And then once I was finished with the raspberry color, I would lock that layer, move to the next layer down, because I like to work from top to bottom with these layered designs. And then I would just start coloring my next layer. And this is like, if I'm illustrating something, like for anything, a sticker or some other project, this is typically how I do it. So I'm just coloring in the lines, and because they're locked on their own layer, I'm just kind of cutting down into the design. So that's the basics of hand inking. So you're gonna wanna use a combination. And then once you're done, let me show you the technique for actually setting it up for the laser. So we're gonna use our most complex version. So let's unlock everything. I'm gonna delete everything here because we don't need it. Oh, where am I? Locked on that layer? All right, cool. And I'm gonna take this one, which is essentially completed. So this is the most complex one. It looks like I might have something locked here in the base color. I just hit undo so I could grab it all together. And I'm going to, I believe you can alt drag and then hold shift and bring it down. It looks like I'm still locked here. Or we can copy and we can paste in place. And this will make sure everything's on the exact same spot on each artboard. So I'm going to paste in place. Command-Shift-V will also do that. And there we go. So if I was going to then prepare this for laser, I'm going to count how many colors I have. So we have the purple line art, orange, pink, and yellow. I'm going to copy this again, and I'm going to paste it on each layer, on each artboard here. So edit, paste in place, or I can select the next artboard, Command-Shift-V, Command-Shift-V. And I'm breaking this into different artboards just so you can see how I would do it. Truthfully, I would probably just do this all on different layers, and I would go through it really quick. I'm going to grab all of them, object, path, outline, stroke, because we do still have a lot of line art around here. And then I'm just going to fuse them step by step. So I'm actually going to label them here for you so we can keep our thoughts straight. So I'm going to click. Let's make this way bigger. That has some tiny text, my friend. All right, make that white, please. All right, so this is going to be our base layer. Thank you for the tooltip, Illustrator. I'm going to copy and paste that. Then this is going to be our light, well, actually our orange layer. Alt drag. This is going to be our pink layer. And alt drag. And this is going to be our line art, our top layer. Now, the two outside layers are the easiest. For the base layer, all we gotta do is grab everything now that we've set it to outlines and go boop, and there we go, base layer done. So one nice solid backer shape finished. So I'm gonna click it, I'm gonna look, I'm gonna see if there's anywhere I missed, and it looks good to go. So I'm ready to proceed with the next ones. So in order to get the next step up, we need to fuse everything together except what would be the base layer. So in this case, I want to delete all of the light yellow and then fuse everything else again. So I could go by hand and try to select, and now my yellow is actually grouped, so it's really easy, but let's say yours isn't and it's kind of like all a bunch of different little pieces. I'm gonna show you a really quick technique for that. So I'm going to group everything by right mouse clicking, and then I'm going to double click to take this into isolation mode. And you can see that takes me into isolation mode. So now I can't accidentally click anything else. I'm going to go find my magic wand tool, and I'm going to check its settings by double clicking because it can be funny. And I want to make sure I set my fill color, and I usually set this to 0 or 1. You can also set stroke color, so you can select everything by stroke color, but we flattened all our strokes, so it doesn't matter. I'm then going to select the yellow. It's going to grab all the yellow, and then I'm going to hit the delete key, and all the yellow is gone. The reason I grouped that and set it into isolation mode is if I didn't, it would select the yellow everywhere across all of my artboards, and I would accidentally delete stuff I didn't want to delete, because you can see it selects it everywhere. So by grouping it and taking it into isolation mode, I don't have that problem. So now I'm going to grab everything here, and I'm going to fuse it. It's going to take a little second because it's thinking really, really hard here. And I can tell there might be something that got missed here because I have something in this highlighted group of stuff that is set to a stroke, not a fill. So I'm going to have to double check that once this filter finishes. And it's definitely thinking very hard here. So, okay, looking a little bit better. This one definitely has a lot of funny little spots here. So that is something we probably want to address. One thing we can do for that, is we can go back through with our blob brush, or we can just be a little bit sneaky. This will work sometimes, but maybe not every time. And instead go to our offset path and just offset it. Oop, not reverse path direction, my friend. All right, let's undo that. All right, object, feels like my battery's dying. All right, object, path, offset path, and then just give it the teeniest offset path. So 0.005, and let's preview that and see if that cleans up all our shapes. So maybe not, let's try 1.5. All right, and actually that worked. So you can see that really simplified things. Uh-oh, we got a frozen computer here. Give me a moment. All right. So there we go. I'm then just gonna fuse everything. Not all of those. Hold on here. Fuse it, and it should eliminate a lot of them. So I probably do have to go clean this one up a little bit, but I'm gonna set it to its color by selecting it, hitting the, what is this guy here, eyedropper, and grabbing the color just so we know what color it was supposed to be. And that one is supposed to be orange. There we go. It looks like we accidentally added a stroke to it. We don't want that. So we're gonna make sure we're set to 0 stroke. Oh my gosh, we have 5% battery. It's gonna be a race to the finish here, y'all. All right. Let's make sure we got it all good to go. Looks like we have a compound path we might have to fix, but I think that's just because my computer's dying. And then we would do the same thing to this one. So we would group it. You can go here to group as well, or Command G. So from here, same thing. Command G to group. Double click. Use your magic wand tool to select the colors you are eliminating. So we need to eliminate that one. And you know what I didn't even think about? I think I mixed up my colors. I did them backwards. Well, there you go. All right, so I'm going to delete the pink. I have these backwards, but you'll see in the end it's fine. And then I'm going to grab all of this and I'm going to fuse it. And then we're going to set that. So it's actually, this one is supposed to be the orange and then the other one was supposed to be the pink. So let's grab that color. Orange. Perfect, that's correct. Now let's take this one. I don't know why I have a stroke here. So you see how there's a purple stroke here? Let's try and fix that. So sometimes when you have something where I click it and you can see there's no stroke applied, but we clearly see one. A little trick for when you have that problem is go to your appearance panel and then sometimes you have to delete the appearance. So it's actually not orange. It lied to me a little bit here. Sometimes there's a hidden appearance and you won't even see it in here. This is some weird glitch in Illustrator I have yet to fully understand, but I will typically delete the fill and the stroke and set them to nothing. And then when we come back and select it, we'll see how it actually is selected. So it looks like I still even have 2 shapes here. So let's refuse those because it probably got messed up when my computer was trying to die on me. Refuse, it is now strokeless and solid. So now we're going to make that the pink color. So I hit shift, even though that's a stroke, I hit shift and that will make it pink. So there we go. We can see that we now have our pink, we now have our orange. And then the easiest one of all is just to select your line art here. So I'm actually gonna ungroup, select my line art, I'm gonna hit copy and then I'm gonna delete it and then I'm just gonna delete everything and paste the line art back in place. So that's like a weird way to do it, but I could have just dragged it to the side. But I'll go to object or edit, my bad, paste in place. So there we go. We have our line art, what is supposed to be our pink and our orange. I have them swapped. And now we can test that this all worked. Let's make this back to a light yellow by just dragging them on top of each other. So you'll see my principle did work here. So then we put this color on here. And we don't need to really line these up for anything. We're not cutting them this way, but we just want to actually layer them on top of one another so we can see that the technique worked. I don't have them perfect, but you can see that is a match for the one above. There's a couple spots that maybe got missed that I'll have to go back in and look at. And I think that's just because I have them misaligned. They're very badly lined right now. But you can see that that absolutely worked, other than I got my orange and my pink mixed up. But you just basically need to fuse each layer with sort of the one above it. So you could go backwards too and fuse the line art layer with the next layer down, which in this case is actually the orange, and then you could fuse it again with the next layer down, that's the pink, and then fuse it again with the bottom layer. But you can see we now have 4 different shapes that we can then cut on the laser, color and layer. So we can cut these from different acrylics or different woods. The only thing you have to go back through and do is just clean up all your stray areas, and that's the most inconvenient part. But if you use your blob brush and you just take your time looking for them, it's really not so bad. You can kind of just essentially erase them like this until they're all gone. And then once you're happy with it, save it, and it's ready to go to the laser. So I will try and show this design in the blog, printed and cut out. I'm probably not going to video that part because you don't really need it. If you know how to use your laser or your gosh, what do you call those, vinyl cutter plotter machines, then you'll be good to go. Your settings will be unique to what you need to do. But there's our 4 layers, and that same way I just did this will work for any of them. So let's just quickly recap. Selecting your line art, flattening it, and then dividing it with a shape beneath it will allow you to select the individual shapes and do a stained glass technique. You can also use the live paint bucket. After you've done that, you can come through with your knife tool and sort of delicately slice shadows and highlights and recolor them. You can also offset your path from your line art just to create a perfectly sort of symmetrical, even expansion or contraction of color. Or you can go through after any of these other ones and then hand draw in areas of highlights and lowlights, shadows, different spots by using your blob brush or your paintbrush tool. And then just making sure you're going from, each layer down and locking the layers as you go will really help you with this. So you want to do your line art first, then your next color, lock it, then the next color beneath it, lock it, and then your base color. After doing that, you can separate all of your layers really easily by beginning with your base layer and then working your way up, fusing each color with all of the colors meant to go above it, and that will make sure that you have a nice solid layered design. So I know that was a long one, but I hope that it will give you an idea of how to create layered designs for whatever technique you're doing, and that you'll have a lot of fun trying that out. So thank you guys so much. I hope it will be helpful to you.